curious, how does a 20-year-old king from a rugged, mountainous backwater manage to conquer the largest superpower on Earth in a single decade? In 334 BC, a single military campaign swept east from Greece, swallowing up vast desert expanses and crashing into the mountains of India. To understand how this happened, we have to look at the world around 500 BC. The geopolitical order was dominated by the Persian Empire. Ancient Greece, meanwhile, was a collection of sophisticated but heavily fractured city-states. Naval powers like Athens and militaristic societies like Sparta spent decades exhausting themselves in destructive local wars. This diagram of the Macedonian phalanx shows the specific military reform that changed the balance of power. King Philip II of Macedonia transformed his kingdom into a military powerhouse by training his infantry to fight in tightly packed formations, 16 ranks deep. Armed with 18-foot pikes called sarissas, they presented an unstoppable wall of iron spear tips to any opponent. Philip used this new army to force the divided Greek city-states into an alliance known as the League of Corinth. With Greece united under his command, he began planning a massive invasion of the Persian Empire. But on the eve of the campaign, Philip was assassinated by his own bodyguard. This violent transition of power placed Philip's 20-year-old son, Alexander, on the throne. The restless military prodigy inherited the ancient world's most advanced military machine and his father's strategic plan to strike at the heart of the Persian Empire. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander mobilized a force of 40,000 men and crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor. He immediately proved his tactical aggression at the river Granicus, personally leading a cavalry charge across the water to shatter the Persian defensive line before they could organize a retreat. Alexander's strategy relied on a coordinated two-part system. The heavily armored infantry of the phalanx acted as an anvil, pinning the enemy in place with their massive pikes. Then, his elite unit of horsemen, the companion cavalry, acted as a hammer, sweeping around the sides to deliver a fatal flanking blow. The Persians quickly attempted to trap the Greeks. At the Battle of Issus, King Darius III emerged behind Alexander's army, cutting off their escape route. Darius commanded a force that, by some estimates, outnumbered the Greeks by nearly 2-to-1. The Greeks negated this numerical advantage by forcing the engagement onto a narrow coastal plain, roughly 6 miles wide, pinned between steep mountains and the sea. This geographic bottleneck physically prevented the enormous Persian army from wrapping around the smaller Macedonian flanks. With the Persian numbers neutralized by the terrain, Alexander spotted a gap in their formation. He regrouped his companion cavalry and led a headlong charge straight through the Persian center, fighting his way toward King Darius. Facing a fearless king charging at him, Darius abandoned the fight and fled in his royal chariot. The flight of the Persian king caused his entire army to collapse. The ensuing slaughter was so intense that soldiers reported using piles of dead Persians to fill a ravine just so they could cross it. Darius left behind his family, his royal treasury, and his western territories. Issus proved that superior tactical positioning could defeat a vastly larger force. By using the landscape to dictate the terms of the fight, Alexander broke the reputation of Persian invincibility and left the western half of the empire exposed. Before pushing deeper into Asia, Alexander marched south to capture Persian naval bases along the Mediterranean. This detour led him to Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator. The Egyptian priests officially recognized him as the son of their gods and crowned him pharaoh. With his rear secured, Alexander marched east into Iraq for a final showdown. At Gaugamela, Darius had assembled a gargantuan army featuring armored cavalry and war elephants. This time, Darius chose a wide, flattened plain to ensure his numerical advantage could not be neutralized by the terrain. Alexander countered by marching his right wing outward, enticing the Persians to stretch their own line to match him. As the Persian center thinned out, Alexander struck. He drove his cavalry through the newly opened gaps, shattering the Persian core and forcing King Darius to flee for a second time. Gaugamela broke the Persian military once and for all. Alexander marched into Babylon and then reached Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the empire. In an act of retribution for the Persian invasion of Greece a century earlier, he ordered the magnificent city to be pillaged and burned to the ground. The destruction of Persepolis marked the end of the War of Revenge. Alexander had achieved his initial goal. But to govern the millions of people living across this territory, the Macedonian invader began to adopt the rituals and customs of an Eastern emperor. Alexander pursued the fugitive Darius east into the rugged terrain of modern-day Afghanistan and Central Asia. When he discovered that the Persian king had been murdered by his own governors, Alexander took up the pursuit of the killers, pushing his army through the towering peaks of the Hindu Kush. The nature of the war shifted. Instead of pitched battles, the Greeks found themselves in a grueling guerrilla conflict against local tribes. As they entered India, they faced terrifying new threats, such as the armored war elephants at the river Hydaspes, that inflicted some of the highest casualties of the entire campaign. The environment was compounded by a growing divide between the king and his men. Alexander began wearing Persian royal dress and demanded that his Greek soldiers prostrate themselves before him. When his veteran generals voiced their discontent, Alexander responded with paranoia, executing several of his oldest commanders over suspected plots. In 326 BC, the campaign reached a physical limit at the Hythasis River. The soldiers had marched thousands of miles and fought continuously for 8 years. Hearing rumors of even larger Indian armies waiting deeper in the interior, the Macedonian army finally mutinied and refused to move another step forward. Alexander was forced to turn back. The same unyielding ambition that had driven him across the known world had finally alienated his own men, leaving him unable to hold the furthest reaches of his conquest. The journey back to Persia was a disaster. Alexander led a large portion of his army through the Gedrosian Desert, where extreme heat and shortages of food and water decimated his exhausted ranks, killing thousands of veterans who had survived every battle. Upon returning to Susa, Alexander attempted to bind his fractured empire together through forced integration. He arranged a mass marriage between Macedonian officers and Persian noblewomen and ordered 30,000 Eastern youths to be trained in Macedonian combat tactics. These plans were cut short in 323 BC. While in Babylon, planning a new invasion of Arabia, the 32-year-old king developed a sudden, mysterious fever. Within days, he was dead. This map shows how quickly the empire collapsed without Alexander's leadership. Because he left no clear succession plan, his massive territory was immediately ripped apart by his generals, who spent the next several decades fighting bloody civil wars to carve out their own kingdoms. The political borders proved temporary, but the 10-year campaign led to the widespread adoption of Greek language, art, and philosophy throughout the Near East and Egypt. This fusion created a shared cultural framework that linked distant civilizations together. While the empire fractured into smaller kingdoms, this shared cultural framework would dictate the intellectual life of the Mediterranean and Western Asia for the next 3 centuries. Alexander's march did not leave behind a single state, but it ensured that Greek ideas would remain the dominant influence in the region long after his own name had passed into legend.